Gamecock fans, now you can have your coffee and also support the Gamecocks in a championship quest to get to the top of the SEC and the top of the country by going to GamecockCoffee.com and purchasing Rise and Shine New Orleans Roast Gourmet Coffee. All of your purchases go to benefit Garnet Trust and put NIL dollars in the coffer of the Gamecocks official NIL collective. Check it out today and support the Gamecocks NIL. Good morning, Gamecock fans. JC Shurburtt here with you with coffee. February 20th, the year of our Lord 2025. It is a Thursday. Great to be talking with you today. As you wake up and get going, talk a little about the Gamecocks, Gamecock recruiting, football recruiting. It seems to be what we like to focus on here on Coffee, and that's just fine with me and just fine with all of you that listen. Certainly very thankful for all of you good folks out there that take the time to either start your day or later in the day or whatever you want to do. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't forget GamecockCoffee.com. Got to get some coffee and popcorn sold. It's like the old school fundraiser for when you were in elementary school, folks. You got to remember the wrapping paper. We used to have to sell the world's finest chocolate bars. Same concept, just for Garnet Trust. It helps the Gamecocks win. So go to GamecockCoffee.com. Get yours today. The official sponsor here of coffee. Brilliant, isn't it? JC had a marketing tie-in. And I may or may not have, when I named this thing Coffee, knew this was coming and felt like it would be pretty good to help the NIL situation with the program and also to name the morning show or the morning podcast, whatever you want to call it. Last night, like yesterday evening, I guess, the sun, I guess, was down by the time it was over. 7-2, South Carolina defeats Queens College in baseball. Paul Maneri after the game talked about the elements. I was kind of, I don't want to say shocked, but slightly surprised that they got that game in just because of some of the weather reports I was getting. And yeah, the upstate has different weather. I grew up in the upstate, different weather than Columbia. Not all the time, but some of the time, most of the time. But when Phil said it was snowing, I was like, well, there's probably at least rain in Columbia or something like that. And Whittle didn't think they would get the game in, but they did. That's baseball, and Maneri, I think he talked about the elements. Ethan Petrie, 3 for 4 last night. Nathan Hall, the Clemson transfer. I like that guy. I think, he's big. He's got some power, got a good frame. I like him. I admittedly did not look at the box score, so I'm assuming he batted leadoff last night. Want to be accurate about that, but 4 for 5. I like him. I think that's a catalyst at the top of that lineup. Gamecocks pitched well, but that's the type of baseball game, man. Hale McGranahan, who's, if you ever follow Hale, he's got a really good sense of humor. He puts on the message board on the Big Spur yesterday. He's like, I think that they should make people play baseball in this weather as punishment. And so there you go. Milwaukee comes to town this weekend. Milwaukee's right up the road from me, probably like driving from Columbia to Atlanta, maybe Columbia to Covington, Georgia, from where I live. And they do get the same weather most of the time, and I doubt they've been outside, just to be honest. I mean, I don't know. You may break a finger playing baseball. It's like 14 was the high yesterday. Man, wife and I are planning on heading back down to South Carolina here this spring, and I literally, been to Columbia a bunch, lived there, all that good stuff. So it's nothing special. It's not like going to the Turks and Caicos or anything, but I feel that way. I'm like, yeah, let's go. Oh gosh. Of course, I went down there 2 or 3 times this past summer. And by the time our August trip in, I'm like, I'm kind of ready to get back out of the 90-something% humidity and all that good stuff. So I'm never happy, but I've blethered on and on about the weather enough. I look at this. We're going to have Darren Usher on Inside the Gamecocks show. Oh, format change. Hate to throw this on you guys and gals in our audience, but it's for you guys and gals. And this is my fault. because when Jamie and I decided, and Phil and Mike decided, let's go 4 hours, but two shows, right? With the show and the morning show. And the idea is get more programming for our audience first and foremost. Second, to take advantage of kind of the unique formats, or unique personalities. Obviously, Phil and I are different than Jamie and I, or Jamie and Phil, or Mike and Phil, or Mike and Jamie, and blah 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 blah. Uh, and we felt like, and then of course, bottom line, we needed more space to sell ad inventory because we do pretty well like with our space, and we don't want to overload you folks with commercials, obviously. Um, so when we did that, the idea on my end was, because I kind of run our YouTube page, and Phil and I do that, and we're like, well, we can monetize the second hour through YouTube because so many of our elements like rejoins and all that are original, not copyrighted music or stock music. And with the morning show, there's some stuff in there that YouTube won't let you monetize. So that was the idea. Well, it's not worth it, because it takes away from, yeah, kind of the flow of the show. And so it also is not good for our audience, because you guys have to click over to a new show and a new stream. Those of you that follow on YouTube, podcast format, it's 4 hours is a long time. Two is kind of your max. So those will still be uploaded as morning show and show. And I do that too. I always eliminate like all the music and intros from that are between shows, like the scroll, like clowns are people too. That song. I don't make people sit through that on podcasts, because it just it's all. I mean, every podcast I listen to, politically or sports wise, I mean, you're sitting through three commercials before it even starts. And I think our podcasts run through 24/7. They do put ads at the beginning, but I kind of on podcasts like to just get to it, right? You know what I'm saying? And in 4 hours is a long time, and then you'd have that bridge in the middle, and you'd be hitting fast forward. So that's going to remain the same. But on YouTube, starting today, it's one continuous stream, so you don't have to flip over. You come in, it's going to be one Inside the Gamecocks stream on YouTube, and then of course we put up interviews, we cut it and put up interviews on our YouTube page and all that. But that's kind of what you can expect also on the app. It will go one continuous stream, and we have Darren Usher in our segment, I guess start of hour 3 at noon. Director of player personnel for South Carolina, runs the recruiting, all that good stuff. It'll be the third time he's been on with us, and so we're excited about talking to Darren. It's kind of a downtime for them because the contact period ended, and it's a good time for coaches to grab vacation. Saw Shane Beamer was down on the coast at his a beach house, or enjoying the coast of South Carolina the other day. So it's a good time to hit him up and talk about the 2024-5 class, and then the 2026 class, and kind of what the objectives are, and how he thinks things went, all that good stuff. Darren's a good interview. He gives you thorough answers, and certainly looking forward to talk to him with Phil and myself today. And then Mike Morgan will join hour 4 with us, but it will be one continuous Inside the Gamecock stream from here going forward with YouTube and the app, and then podcast will be the same. So anyway, just wanted to fill you guys in on that right off the top of the bat, top of the hat, top of the what? This is not the top of the bat or the top of the hat, JC. Anyway, right off the bat, how about that? So recruiting, we're going to talk about football recruiting still. Like I said, it's kind of in a lull. You kind of have these days, an aggressive time in January for the next class. It used to be, of course, a mad dash in January for the current class, because that's when people took official visits. I mean, those were fun. People ask me all the time, do you miss it? Bill Gunner on 107.5, because he was kind of working with me on the Big Spur back in the day when it was a mad dash in January. He asked me if I miss it. And I do and I don't. In January, I certainly do. But I mean, it's kind of nice sometimes to get everything done in December and then start looking forward and getting a jump on the next class because what we're going to talk about today, official visits now are in June. Can't escape the J months, right? But June is official visits. And man, I'll tell you this, just in general, as an aside, had South Carolina back in the early Spurrier, Holtz-ish era, before they got the facilities going and stuff like that, had they had to have official visits in June, North Carolina and Clemson would have eaten their lunch. And I'll tell you why. Columbia in the summertime, before they did that, and look, I lived in Columbia back in the late 90s when I was going to school at Carolina one summer. I had a great time. Kind of felt like I had the place to myself, right? Fun place, right? Being from Spartanburg. But I compare it to Clemson, which has a lake and all the stuff you associate with summer fun. And then the late Brad Lawing told us one time that Chapel Hill, there's no more beautiful place in the summertime. And, other schools too had a nice, better summer campus setup than Carolina. That would have been problematic. So if you're a Gamecock, you're probably thankful that this change has come sort of later, after you've built your infrastructure. You got the pool at the Strom. You got, they bring out, I don't remember if they brought out the slip and slide that's fall camp, but I mean, they're set up to have better experience, to work around the brutal Columbia weather and the sort of deserted town thing. I mean, I think they've done quite well with summer official visits for a while now. And so that helps, that really helps. So I just couldn't imagine it back then. Under Muschamp, they could just always have taken everybody out to his lake house and had a blast. But when Spurrier was here, that would have been good. Carolina did really well when Spurrier was here, getting guys in for game visits and things like that. It was always, and whereas Clemson was very good in the summertime and all that good stuff. Of course, Carolina and Clemson this coming cycle in 26 are going head to head against from some guys, but they really don't battle as much as they used to. Nevertheless, I do think that these summer visits do go well, and I'm like I said, I think Carolina's more set up to kind of battle everything else, and they do a good job with official visits in the summer because they're signing in December. So what you do now, you get everybody for the next class on campus for games, and they get fired up, and you get on their visit list, and they want to come back and see you and stuff like that, and that's how you kind of get ahead in recruiting. And then January is kind of the big, like for 2026, big identification. If you notice, a lot of offers went out in January, and they will continue to go out moving forward as we get back into spring practice with March and the other types of periods in recruiting. So we'll talk to Darren about all that. But what I want to kind of focus on is the big recruiting weekend. You used to have this in January. You call it the big weekend, right? The big weekend energy. And South Carolina, certainly, when you look at the scheduled official visits for June, they do have a big one set up. So I want to tell you about Encapsulate real quick. I did not yesterday. www.encapsulateusa.com. Do what I'm doing. Do what Mike Morgan's doing. It works for us. If you're into supplements, if you just want to feel better, it's all natural mushroom supplements. Encapsulateusa.com. Use code JCM to get $10 off, free shipping under $60. And then I'll tell you again about GamecockCoffee.com. Help fill those NIL coffers. Every little bit helps. Small dollar stuff for NIL is going to be big moving forward for the collectives and things like that with rev share coming. All right, so June 20th, that's the weekend everybody's pointing to. And it's February 20th, right? So we're 4 months exactly away from this weekend happening. There is going to be a lot of activity. There will be players coming in for unofficials all during spring, players coming in for the spring game. It's going to happen. This will likely change. I can't guarantee this is set in stone, obviously. Now, once it's scheduled, it goes on the bigspur.com 24/7 sports official visit list. So it's scheduled. It's written in pen. That doesn't mean they can't cancel visits. I mean, they would have to cancel the visit to not visit. That's what I'm saying. It's more than just, hey, we might visit. See you then. That kind of thing. Meaning that, and I don't know if they'd make arrangements this far out. Maybe so. Um, Maybe good to save money if you get flights this far out, but and things like that. Book the block of hotel rooms. I don't really know how it all works, but these are guys that have said yes, I'm coming in that weekend, and that's a list. I dig it. If they get 80% of these players, 70% of these players, that's a win. That's a big win, folks. Just these are a lot of blue chip guys that are what I call no brainers as far as being good. Gonna kind of start in reverse order according to how they're listed on the site. Just to kind of break them down. And the first one I'll talk about it. These are some of these players we talked about here on Coffee before. Some we haven't. So Brian Harris is a defensive tackle that I saw in the database. I don't think he's committed to Maryland anymore. He didn't have the little Terp M beside his name, but he's from Mandarin High School, Jacksonville, Florida. 6'4", 285. A player that Travian Robertson evaluated, immediately offered. They had him in for an unofficial. Likes the Gamecocks. Jacksonville over the years has been a kind of a mixed bag for Carolina. It looked like Pup Howard was going to be good, and he is good. He's playing well at Florida. Probably wasn't on this past year's team in 2024. Probably wasn't going to play a whole lot just because of the speed that Carolina added. Maybe when Kamara left, he would have played instead of Fred Johnson. But, probably a better fit at Florida. Florida was the number 2 team for him. It's close to home. Just don't get a speeding ticket in Waldo or whatever the hell that small speed trap is. They have a nice Whataburger along the way there, but it's just thoroughly unimpressed. I was telling my wife the other day because the stepson is looking at colleges. He's looking at Florida Atlantic, and she was asking me about University of Florida, and I was like, yeah, it's interesting. Before, you had all these video apps like Instagram and TikTok and things like that. Facebook was just now a thing, and back in the Urban Meyer era. They used to send mail and advertise to kids. You look at the picture of Florida and you think you were like a couple of miles from the beach. Florida Atlantic is a couple of miles from the beach. It's in Boca. But I was like, they don't know about Waldo. And they don't know that it's right off 75 near Ocala, and you're miles from Tampa at the University of Florida. I was like, South Carolina probably should have taking some pictures of some palmetto trees and acting like old buildings and be like, close to Charleston, come, go play football near Charleston, Anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. But nowadays you can't fool them. I mean, everybody knows where everything is if they bother to look it up. So Jacksonville, back to Brian Harris, it's been a mixed bag. There were some misses during the Spurrier era, and, Muschamp didn't really recruit it all that hard. Shaq Wilson obviously was one of the better players to come out of Jacksonville that played at South Carolina. And there's been some through the years. It's not a complete bust city, but for an area with that many good high school football programs, and they all kind of, Mandarin puts out players and First Coast and all these players. It's not, and I'm talking Jacksonville proper. I know Perry Orth, Hayden Hurst, those guys are from that area, and obviously they were good players, but they're kind of south a little bit. But, Brian Harris is the next guy they're looking at from Jacksonville. I like him on film. He's strong. Lewis Nix, who went to Notre Dame, was a Jacksonville player that was really good that I scouted. But, they did have some busts, just honest, some guys that we all thought were no-brainers that bust. So, but Brian Harris, Jacksonville, he's on the official visit list. Obviously South Carolina has a need for defensive tackles in this class. Looking at him on film, I think he checks out. It'll be kind of a wait and see. But with a lot of these guys, I wouldn't put him in the no-brainer category. But we haven't really. With the old defensive line coach, he did go 0 for 4 with four guys he signed when he first got here. We haven't seen Travian Robertson's like eval skills yet. I mean, because Caleb Williams and Christian Ingram were not, players that necessarily. I mean, Christian Ingram, you found him, but it's not. It's a different situation with Harris. So this is one I've got my eye on. Peyton Dyer, who's committed to South Carolina as of now. Taller corner out of Duluth. I told you guys either here or on the show. Really great camp the other day. One of those players that I think South Carolina looked at it and said, "Oh, you want to commit? Great." Georgia's sneaking around though. It's a Georgia player, but he's really good. A corner. And this next guy, Samari Matthews, I'm talking about, is probably more well known. He's from North Carolina, the Charlotte area. It's a Clemson, South Carolina battle essentially for him with some other schools in the mix. And he's also on the visit list. Samari is probably more of the higher profile guy that you know. I can't sit here and tell you that Samari Matthews is better than Peyton Dyer. Like it just man on man. And that's not a knock on Samari. Samari's really good. Peyton Dyer's really good too. But you play more than one corner, right? South Carolina, if you move a corner to nickel, they play three. So you need as many of these guys as you can get. But really, really intrigued by Peyton Dyer. And then Samari Matthews, like I said, is scheduled to come in for a visit. Keeps going back and forth, Clemson, South Carolina. I know there's a crystal ball in for Clemson. I'd probably, if you made me put in a prediction right now, probably tip back towards South Carolina, but it goes back and forth. So this is a Palmetto State battle for right now. The big guy, the big man, Desmond Green from Timberland, St. Stephen. I was trying to think of players from Timberland, and Aldrich Fordham, I believe, was the last Gamecock from Timberland. I'm pretty sure he's from Timberland. St. Stephen, Timberland High School down there in the Low Country. Played during the Spurrier era, played for Lawing, who I mentioned earlier. Green, there was a Quentin Washington there that was big offensive lineman, surprised everybody and ended up going to Michigan, didn't do anything at Michigan. But that was one of those recruiting losses that wasn't really a loss. Adam Patterson kind of falls into that category back in the day. I thought Junior Hemingway, who went to Michigan, would be that way, but I was dead wrong. Junior Hemingway ended up being a ball player at Michigan. But Adam Patterson went to Michigan, didn't do anything. Quentin Washington went to Michigan, didn't do anything. There was a running back, Carlos Brown from Georgia, that Michigan beat Carolina on, didn't do anything. So back in my era, there were lots that didn't do anything from the South that went up there that the Wolverines beat the Gamecocks on. But Desmond Green is not, for as of now, I think Michigan may have offered him, is not a Michigan Carolina battle. I believe it's Georgia and South Carolina. I think some would have thought, if you followed the visits in the fall, that Desmond was leaning to UGA. I believe that too. I think they're accurate with that. He's been back to South Carolina since. I'm sure he'll be back to Athens at some point, but Carolina's right there. You gotta defend your state, right? But I do always say, as far as like my rules of in-state recruiting, it goes kind of like this. Clemson's going to get their share if they go to battle for the Gamecocks. It's just happened since the beginning of time. Some kids go to Carolina, some kids go to Clemson. If it's a binary choice, if you bat over 50% at either school, you're doing well, in my opinion. And if even when you're rolling like Clemson was and Carolina wasn't, Carolina got some players when you're talking about the top kids from the state that they wanted. They didn't compete for a lot of them because they were going out of state. But if you kind of look at that. That's one, the in-state factor. Because like it or not, they got a good program, and they always have, and it appeals to a lot of players. So that's just a fact that we don't want to discuss too much here, but that's just how it goes. Been that way our whole lives. We can't change that. Yeah, can't change that. Georgia, because of their proximity, if you look at if Athens was in located like in Carrollton or Albany, or sorry, if UGA was not located in Athens, it was in Carrollton, Albany, that's fine. But there, it's kind of east of Atlanta towards South Carolina. It's close to home, and it's Georgia, and they put a slew of guys in the NFL. Even this year's team at Georgia that lost a couple of games, which I loved that team this year at Georgia. Thought they did a lot. They had 14 combine invites. They were right up there with everybody else. So they put guys in the NFL. Kirby's, I want to say, I don't want to say picked off some players, but they do have three South Carolina guys playing. Ingram Dawkins from Gaffney, who they got during the coaching transition. I'm still convinced had there not been a coaching change in COVID and all that, Gamecocks probably would have gotten him. And Justice Boone out of Sumter, who they lost during that time. Monroe Freeling, who the Gamecocks weren't all that fired up about out of high school. And he didn't, I guess his parents were from Oregon or something. They were kind of moving guys from Oceanside Christian. He's playing. He rotates at offensive tackle. And then Xavier McLeod, who, of course, signed with Carolina, got kicked off the team, ended up at Georgia. He's playing at D tackles. They got three South Carolina kids over there playing for the Dogs. And they always have had a smattering, right? They'll get players. I mean, it's kind of funny because a lot, but outside of AJ Green, who anybody would have had, who South Carolina kind of didn't recruit that guy the right way, and Mark Richt did. Of course, the Gamecocks got Cliff Matthews, who Georgia was trying to get. Outside of AJ Green, I'm trying to think. The South Carolina player, like Richard Seymour, was a mistake from Lower Richland. He went to Georgia. Carolina didn't want him. Tim Jennings was a recruiting mistake. He went to Shrine Bowl, balled out. Carolina wouldn't offer him during the Holtz era. Thought he was too small. He's from Orangeburg. He goes over there and he's a star for Mark Richt when they won the SEC championship in '02. Star, just a star player, right? So guys like that. I mentioned Monroe Freeling. It was a guy that kind of just let go. I mean, they got the big offensive lineman from North Augusta has a Georgia offer. Kirby's been there. Carolina hadn't gone. So sometimes, Georgia may outsmart the Gamecocks. And I'm not talking about Beamer or anybody's staff specifically, but sometimes that's happened. Alabama's taken some kids Carolina hadn't really been fired up about through the years. And guess what? Most of the time they've gone to Alabama and done nothing. Nothing. And that was Nick Saban. But Georgia, through the years, no matter who the coach, they'll pull a guy from South Carolina that, and the reality is that the in-state schools are like, I don't know what they're doing. And they know what they're doing. So we'll see what happens with that. But my point to all that, got long-winded there. Apologize. Actually, I don't know. You guys have listened to me for a long time. I mean, you know what I do. I shouldn't apologize. The point is, Georgia is going to fundamentally come over the border and get players. They'll pick some off. So that's who you're basically, as long as the recruiting in-state stays that way, you're fine. If you're South Carolina, you're signing more, your share or more. You understand you'll lose some to Clemson, and you'll understand every now and then Georgia will come over again. Now, Tennessee starts coming in here picking off players. North Carolina comes in here and starts picking off players. Florida State comes back in the state and picks off players. You got guys going to, like a big group going to Notre Dame. That's a problem. Don't let that happen. Notre Dame, Michigan, who I mentioned earlier, you got to shut those guys out. And really, as time has moved on and South Carolina's improved its program and facilities, and the crowd at Williams-Brice has been awesome, and it's hard for those schools to come into South Carolina and get players. So that's that. So Desmond Green, from Timberland, is a Georgia Carolina battle right now. He's huge, massive, 350, big guy, offensive lineman, one of several. Another offensive lineman, Geneve Carr. Here's a guy from IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. Wow. Big athletic interior player that will be visiting, likes the Gamecocks quite a bit. Oh, this next player, get excited about this guy. Georgia's offered him. He's from Northwestern and Rock Hill. Talked about him many times. Tamarian Watkins, another big freak safety. By the way, did you guys read on thebigspur.com, Tony Morrell this morning? 6'4", 220 for Kendall Daniels Jr., freshman safety. That's a freak. That's a freak. They love these big, freaky safeties. So hopefully, and I have no reason to think not, hopefully they can run because there's been coaches in the past that had, taller receivers that fell in love with taller receivers, but none of those guys could run or were athletic or could get open. They're just merely tall. I don't think Tamarian Watkins, who's scheduled to visit officially on the 20th of June, and then this next guy, Jazavian Currents, who's already committed to the Gamecocks' #1 player in the state from South Point. I don't think that's the case with these guys. Just watching them, just a hunch with those. I mentioned Samari Matthews coming in, so that's a great secondary group, and then another offensive lineman. Who's a national level recruit from Virginia, Darius Gray, been to South Carolina a whole bunch. With him, and I've said this before, South Carolina has kind of been at the top, just loving the Gamecocks, all that good stuff. But you kind of think in terms of commit window, like the red zone in commitment. You think, well, if they push, they could probably get him committed. Or maybe they did push and didn't get him committed. And then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 more schools come up, and he's more open, and he visits. I don't know. Sometimes when that's the perception, it's accurate, and the guy, you end up losing him, and you thought you had him. Sometimes that's just kind of how it goes, and you end up getting him anyway. I'd say it's probably 50-50 as far as that, but that's kind of the feel I get for Darius Gray right now. He's a heck of a player, though, really special. Big upside, another blue chip offensive lineman. And then the drum roll, please, rounding out the list of what is now scheduled as 9 official visitors that weekend. It'll go into double digits. 5-star quarterback Jared Curtis from Nashville, Tennessee. You guys know him. You love him. Quarterback recruiting is getting interesting because Brady Smeagol from California has tons of legit interest in Carolina. And then there's Landon Duckworth, who's like wanting to come back and re-enter the chat. With Duckworth, I just keep an eye on Florida State because of Gus Malzahn, and he is a good fit. And Malzahn has a rep in Alabama, and that's where Duckworth's from, and a pretty good one. I mean, Auburn fans should miss him. He's the only guy that's won recently there, and Duckworth was probably heading to UCF before the change, and so I'd watch Florida State with him. But we're saying the right things right now, and obviously when you watch Lenora Sellers, and you have that kind of skill set, and his stock keeps going up and up and up. Great job by Dowell Loggins identifying him early, but so that quarterback recruiting situation, and we talked about this, that whole episode dedicated to it's going to be interesting. If I were just looking at it, and as far, folks, and I'll wrap up with this, as far as like what would be my order of preference as far as who do I think will be a player, and this is just my opinion. I could be wrong. I would say Curtis 1, Duckworth a close second, and Smeagol third, but in the game, it's just a different style of offense with him. Because he's not, doing more checking on him. He's not a statue back there. He's just not what you'd call, he's more of an arm guy. Some guys like Spencer Rattler could move a little bit, right? But he's got, his deal is his arm. Lenore Sellers' great arm, but as a runner, he's also elite. It's hard to find that combination that he has. But hey, I like the way Duckworth and Aaron Nolan is not a runner, by the way, the transfer quarterback. And I don't know that I would call Jared Curtis a runner so much as a crafty kind of runner. People compare him to Mahomes, style wise, probably. I'd have to really break it down. I don't like making comparisons like that. uh, that's why I've avoided the Cam Newton comparisons with Sellers as far as like giving my personal take on it. I have repeated that and passed it along. Hey, they think Sellers is Cam Newton. And he's big like Cam Newton, so there you go. But there's a lot of big quarterbacks that can't run like Lenore, Sellers, and Cam Newton. So anyway, but I just think Curtis with as far as and then there's the fact that I think all these guys are going to need the quarterbacks a red shirt kind of. So they can kind of sit and do whatever. So that's good. Anyway, this is JC Shurburtt. And please tune in today. Darren Usher, once again, will be on Phil and I. It's going to be one big stream today, so you guys don't have to move from one stream to the other on YouTube at least, and then on the app, and then uh, also on X if you follow us on Twitter or X or whatever. And then podcast will be chopped up like it normally is. Don't forget GamecockCoffee.com. Support NIL at Carolina. JC Shurburtt signing off from Coffee. Hope you guys have a wonderful Thursday. I will be back later today. Holla at you soon.